Hi, I'm Alan, a customer support engineer at StrongDM, and I will be walking you through 5 of the most common workflows you can automate with our SDKs. For this demo, I'll be using Python, but you do have the option to also use Go, Ruby, and Java as well. So if we take a look over here, the first workflow we'll be going over is creating a new resource, in this case an SSH resource. For this script, I'll kind of go over the basics of the SDK and what you need to be able to perform all these actions. Initially, we'll be importing a StrongDM package, and then we'll be setting up an access key and a secret key. And as you can see, mine are set up in my environment variables. It's a lot safer than posting your keys plain text in the scripts. And if we look over here to the admin UI side, under Access, API, and Admin Tokens, this is where you can create a new API key. Give it a quick name, select your permissions and some type of expiration, create. And these are the keys that you'll need to post in your environment variables. For the next step here, we'll be creating our StrongDM client, which will use the access key and the secret key we define above. The next step would be creating the resource itself. In this case, we'll hold all of that in the SSH server variable, and we'll define the name, host name, username, and port. You do have the option to specify a few more parameters if you mouse over this. And then the next step would be creating the resource and giving it a timeout of 30 seconds to complete that action. Once that's completed, we print out the resource name, ID, and the public key. Let's run this real quick. All right, you can see we have the name, ID, and public key. The public key is what you would be copying to your SSH server's authorized keys file. Now, in the admin UI, if we go over to the servers tab, we can see that the Python demo resource we just created is available. Of course, this won't connect as it has fake information, so we won't be getting a green health check here. But that is for this initial workflow. Okay, now for the second workflow, we'll be going over creating a new gateway. As you can see, it has pretty much the same layout as the previous script, except instead of creating the SSH resource, we'll be creating the gateway here. And you can specify the gateway name, listen address, and other parameters. Well, here we'll be creating the gateway and printing out the gateway name, ID, and the token. So let's see what that looks like. All right, so this is the token you would be using on your relay server to basically connect this new gateway you create in the admin UI to the server. So if we go here under network gateways, we can see the Python demo we just created. Of course, this one won't have a heartbeat or any of the relevant information, as well as it's using fake information. But that is it for the second workflow. Okay, now for the third workflow, we'll be going over listing resources. This is probably one of the simpler workflows you'd be attempting. So we can see here we're using the list function with nothing for a parameter here. You do have the option to filter it by types, for example, servers, databases, clusters, that type of thing. And then we print out the resource name, host name, and ID. Some resources don't have a host name, for example, like a website resource. So I do like to have some exception handling here to let us know. So let's run that real quick and see what it looks like. You can see, for example, the SSH server, it lists the host name. If we look over in the admin UI, it matches up exactly. And then some of the resources here at the bottom that don't have a host name, showing that exception. Now, If you want to see what options you do have available, you can just print everything instead of certain parameters. Let's run that again. You can see now for each resource, I'm able to see all of the relevant information. And this kind of helps you if you want to see what you're able to output for each one. And that's it for listing resources. For the fourth workflow, we'll be going over granting temporary access to users for certain resources. For this example, we'll be creating the user and the resource and then granting the temporary access to it. But you do have the option to list your existing resources and your existing users and grant temporary access to those. So here you can see we're creating a Python demo user. This is the creation method. Then we print out their email and their ID. Then we create the data source, in this case, a Postgres resource. And creating here. Then printing out the resource name and ID. And then here we'll be creating the grant, the account grant, where we link that resource ID to that user. And we'll be giving it time frame of how long they'll be getting the access. In this case, we're using a current time plus a delta of 10 minutes. So it'll expire in 10 minutes from now. This is the action where we create the grant and then we print out the grant ID once it's successful. So let's see what this looks like. There we go. The user was created, the resource created, and then the grant was performed. So if we go here to the users, let's find it real quick. We can see Python demo here. No roles. They do have a temporary access set. So if we go into this user, their temporary access, we can see this example Postgres data source for temp grant is assigned to them, and it expires 10 minutes from when it was created. And that is it for this workflow. And now for the last workflow, we'll be looking at auditing users. And this script is a little bit more involved. It's a bit more complicated, but I'll try and kind of explain piece by piece. I just want to start at the bottom real quick for this. We can see that with the script, we will be printing out the ID of the user, their name, their email, every role they have attached to them, and every resource they have attached to them, which are granted by those roles. If we scroll back to the top, we can see the functions here. So for this one, we'll be getting each role for that user based on their user ID. Then we get all of the resources that are attached to that role. And here we will be basically filtering out all of the resources within the access rules for those roles for each user. And a few more functions here to ignore duplicates, remove empty values, type of thing. Then the function here to get the roles for the user, where all the bulk of it happens. And then we store all of this information in a dictionary. So we'll have the user ID, first name, last name, email, the full role list, and the full resource list for that user. And then you can see at the bottom here, we print out all of that information. So let's execute that real quick. So you can see here, we have the user's ID, their name, email, all the roles they have access to, and all of the resources that they have access to. So we'll just take a look at onboarding user, for example. We can see that they have the role onboarding. So right here, onboarding. Go in here, look at the role. If you click inside the role, we can look at their access rules. and show the list of resources attached to those access rules. So in this case, just SSH server for this user. And that is about it. Let's see if there's anything that I missed here. Oh yeah, something to mention is when you do list all of the users for this auditing script, you do have the option to filter out service accounts. So as you can see, none of these service accounts show up because I specified type user, and also suspended false. So this is only listing active users. You do have the option to remove all of this filtering and get everything returned to you. And that is it for this script. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.